The other thing that we use over and over again for wagons is casters and brakes. There are two main families of casters. There's the swivel caster that can rotate around its base so that it can move freely in 360-degree motion. Swivel casters can also be called smart casters because they rotate, or rotating casters. Swivel, smart, rotating casters, all acceptable on a quiz or test in the future. One limitation for swivel casters is they have what is called a radius of rotation. Basically, you can't just quickly switch from one direction to a completely opposing direction with a swivel caster. It needs to be able to rotate around the caster's center of rotation, the actual center point on the caster plate that is attached to your object. So that requires you to actually move the object in a slightly circular motion to change the direction. You'll notice that when you move scenery around when you're on a run crew or something like that, or even when you're moving some of our rolling tables around in the shop or on the stage. So that's a downside of a swivel caster. Plus side, you can go in any direction. Next type of caster is the rigid caster, also can be called the dumb caster or the straight caster. A rigid caster does not rotate. It is fastened in place and it can roll forward or it can roll backward. There is no turning that caster. A way to get around the downside of the swivel caster, that whole radius of rotation, is to use what is called a tri-swivel caster. The tri-swivel casters have three casters that are mounted onto a plate, and those three casters are mounted to their own plate that can pivot around a central point on the plate that is bolted to the piece of scenery. All three of those casters have the same radius of rotation, which just happens to be the center point of the plate that they're bolted to. This allows them to be able to change direction abruptly, going forward one direction and in reverse the other direction, because they pivot on their own around their own plate. It doesn't make a lot of sense unless you can see it in action. But if you can picture it, if you can visualize it in your head, it's a way to get around using a swivel caster. They don't support as much weight because their casters are smaller. They're also a lot more expensive, and they're more sizable for the same job that you would use a swivel caster for, because the wheels can't support as much weight. So it's a give and take situation there. Usually what you're going to see used is a swivel caster or a rigid caster. Yeah, for larger companies, you might see a tri-swivel caster. When you've got something that rolls, you also need a way to make it not roll. So in addition to casters on those types of wagons, you will also need some way to brake them. The two standard types that you're going to run into in scenery are going to be the hand brake. It is called a hand brake because it is meant to be used with your hand. Do not use your foot on these. They're designed for the strength in your arm, not the strength in your leg. Your legs are a lot stronger, so if the piece of scenery is too heavy and you force it down with your foot, what you can end up doing is bending the shaft of the brake, which causes it not to be able to be used anymore. The shaft has to ride in the assembly of the brake, and if it's bent, it can't go through that assembly. So it can't be opened or closed anymore. So we can't use it anymore. So only use your hands with hand brakes. You also have foot brakes, which can be used with your foot. They're larger and they're more robust for heavier pieces of scenery. But don't use your foot with a hand brake, use your hand. These are meant to be set so that they lift the scenery a fraction of an inch off the floor, just enough to take weight slightly off of the casters so that they are not able to roll. Okay? They are not meant to lift the scenery off the casters completely. There are certain brakes that are designed to do that. These are not those. These are meant to provide a little bit of tension with the floor so that it's less likely to move. Other options for brakes are barrel bolts. We can hang them vertically on a piece of scenery, drill a hole into the floor. Once we roll the piece of scenery into place over that hole, we rotate the bolt so that it slides freely down into that hole, and that locks it onto the stage. That provides a more sturdy locking than handbrakes do sometimes, but you can't use them in all instances because you can't drill into every floor. So a handbrake or foot brake is used when you can't. Another option are pneumatic brakes or pneumatic casters. So you can actually use an air bladder to raise and lower a caster using compressed air. So you release air into the air bladder to fill it up to a certain pressure. That pressure has been dialed in to lift the weight of the wagon that you're trying to roll and push the casters out onto the floor. Then you can roll the object freely while the air power is engaged. And then when you cut the air power, the bladders slowly let their air out. The casters are receded into the base of the platform, and the platform sits on the ground. It's really cool. We don't have it here. I would love to get one just to show you the concept of it, or get a set of them so that we can have one of these that we can use for classroom stuff or for a show. I would love to get some of those because they're really cool. But those are pneumatic casters, and you can use pneumatic brakes as well that act the same, but instead of the bladders pushing the casters down, what they would do is the casters would be set and you would be pushing a flat piece down to push the caster slightly off the floor and break the platform. And then when you release the brakes, then the bladders get pushed down and the brake goes up. So that's everything that I have for you guys today. Please make sure to complete the assignment as well, just so that I'm sure that you guys listen to this. It will ask questions over some of the stuff that I covered in this lecture, just to assure me that you watched the lecture, that you listened to the whole thing, and that you comprehend some of the stuff. For later, when we get into quizzes and tests and actually into the shop to build, you have a general knowledge before we start getting hands-on. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. I will try to respond to them as quickly as possible. If there are any issues with this recording or with the assignment, also email me and I will try to fix it as much as I can. I should be back on campus on Monday, so I will see you guys then. Have a great weekend.